I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Nation Radio program. It is Friday, the 4th of April. I'm Clint, your host. I don't even like to use my last name anymore. Isn't that funny? That darn Daniel, he's really gotten to me. I before we go on, I don't have any guests today, so it's funny. I got an email the other day, and they said, Clint, can you please talk less when you have your guests? I don't tune into your show to listen to you. I tune in to listen to your guest. And it was a kind of a rude email, actually. And, I appreciate the concept, but I kindly replied that since there is no actual symbol or word that represents the bird, consider this to be exactly that in written form. Today, if you don't want to hear me talk, you might as well tune out, because today we're going to have a little lesson in what law actually is. And really, it's just a lesson straight from Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Call it a lecture, call it a rant, whatever you want. I want to address a couple of the phone calls we received yesterday. By very well-intentioned people. We have to understand something here, folks, that all forms of law, and there's a lot of forms of law. There's civil law, there's common law, there's canon law, there's arbitrary law, there's just law, there's criminal law, foreign law, international law, martial law, merchant, or the law merchant, municipal law, there's the law of nations. There's the law of nature, which we're going to talk about. There's penal law, positive law, negative law, private law, prospective law, public law, retrospective law, statute law, unwritten law, written law. And there's lawlessness. There's lawful things, and there's ex post facto law. There's law of the 12 tables. There's the laws of the Hanse Towns, laws of Oleron, the laws of Wisby, the laws Rodin. There's a lot of law out there. But there's only one true law of nature. I want people to really grasp this concept. Every other form of law is designed to get out from under the responsibility of men to themselves and to their fellow man. Okay? That's all you need to know. I mean, that really is. So one of the comments yesterday was that you want to be in common law. And it makes me cringe when I hear, it makes me cringe as much as when anybody talks about the Constitution being the law of the land. It is not true, because as we discovered, land does not mean what we think it is. Land means literally Constitution. The Constitution is the law of the Constitution. Land is real. It's tangible. It's something you could step on. But the law of the land, when you talk about land as a legal term, it does not mean that. It means something completely artificial. It is not of nature. All other forms of law are not natural. They are not under quote-unquote God, whatever that means to you. Okay, let's start out with the common law, because that seems to be the one that everybody loves. Everybody thinks common law. Oh, I love the common law. What is common law? Now, if you go to Bouvier's dictionary, you can go to constitution.org/Bouv or Bouvier. If we just type in Bouvier's Law Dictionary 1856, it'll come up. There's an online version. And I want you to understand this was the dictionary that was commissioned by Congress to become what is called the Dictionary Act, the only dictionary, as far as I understand it, to actually be commissioned by Congress and be part of the law. Okay? This is why I love it so, because it explains exactly what the words are, as it was 1856 and before that. So it's a way to know what the actual words mean in the Constitution and in law prior to the Civil War, of course. What is common law? Okay, law, common. This is from Bouvier's. The common law is that which derives its force and authority from the universal consent and immemorial practice of the people. It has never received the sanction of the legislature by an express act, which is the criterion by which it is distinguished from the statute law. It has never been reduced to writing. By this expression, however, it is not meant that all those laws are at present merely oral or communicated from former ages to the present solely by word of mouth, but that the evidence of our common law is contained in our books of reports, and depends on the general practice and judicial adjudications of our courts. That is common law. What else does it say? Going on to the second definition. The common law is derived from two sources. Remember, this is from Congress. Two sources. The common law of England and the practice and decision of our own courts. Do you want to be under common law? Well, more power to you. That means you're under the power and jurisdiction and quote-unquote public opinion of the courts. In some states, the English common law has been adopted by statute. There is no general rule to ascertain what part of the English common law is valid and binding. To run the line of distinction is subject of embarrassment to courts, and the want of it a great perplexity to the student. It may, however, be observed generally that it is binding where it has not been superseded by the Constitution of the United States or of the several states, or by their legislative enactments, or varied by custom, and where it is founded in reason and consonant to the genius and matters of the people. The phrase common law occurs in the 7th article of the amendments of the Constitution of the United States, where it says, quote, in suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall not exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. The common law here mentioned is the common law of England and not of any particular state. This term is used in contradistinction to equity, admiralty, and maritime law. The common law of England is not in all respects to be taken as that of the United States or of the several states. Its general principles are adopted only so far as they are applicable to our situation. Folks, do you know what equity means? Equity is a good thing. We replaced equity with equality. Equity simply defined, in fact, I'm going to look it up to perfectly define it according to Bouvier's. And it's a very, very, very important distinction. What is equity? Oh, so important. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. Is it your world? You're the creator. Find freedom on this campus.
All right, folks, welcome back.
That you can do it.
So you want to be under the common law. Well, that's your choice, but what does it mean when says the phrase common law, that term is used in contradistinction to equity? What does that mean? Well, you see, when we go to the word equitable in Bouvier's Law Dictionary, and of course this is the same dictionary, so it is the opposite of this. What is equitable? Simply defined, to be in equity is to be in conformity to the natural law. Now, do you want to be under the natural law? After all we've talked about it, the law of nature, if you will? Or do you want to be under what the United States and common law provides, which is equality? Okay, what's the difference? Equity, equality, sounds like the same. No, folks. Not the same thing in any way, shape, or form, although they'd like you to believe it is. What does it mean that all men are created equal? Let's read what equality means. Remember, this is Bouvier's Law Dictionary, or the Dictionary Act. Thus, it is defining what the word equality means in government, in the Constitution. What is equality compared to equitable? Now remember, to be equitable is that which is in conformity to the natural law. Your natural rights cannot be taken away. Your God-given rights, in other words. Equality means something completely different. Here it is, folks. Possessing the same rights and being liable to the same duties. Does that sound like equity? No. Don't be confused. It goes on. You see, it's not just a simple definition. Equality is tyranny. You must understand. Possessing the same rights and being liable to the same duties. Persons. There are no persons in natural law. Remember that? Persons are all equal before the law. Oh, well, that sounds great, doesn't it? No, folks, that is not great because it doesn't mean what you think it means. Persons are all equal before the law. Whatever adventitious advantages some may possess over others. What are we talking about here? How about slaves? Remember, this was 1856. There were still slaves. You're all equal before the law unless you're a slave, unless you're a lower class, a different form of citizen. You see, equality doesn't mean equality because it allows adventitious advantages by some others, which they may possess over you. Oh, well, that sounds like your government, doesn't it? It goes on to say all persons are protected by the law. And get this. This is what government says. All persons are protected by the law, and obedience to it is required from all persons. Does that sound like equity? No, because none of the laws of the United States are equitable. They are not under the natural law. They are opposed to equity. Obedience to the law is required from all. Whatever adventitious advantages some may possess over others. That's equality? Really? Number 3 says, and judges in court while exercising their functions are all upon an equality. It being a rule that pairs non est postus. A judge cannot therefore punish another judge of the same court for using any expression in court, although the words used might have been in contempt in any other person. Does that sound like equality? When a judge is immune from the law that he's there to referee? A judge can be in contempt of the law, and no other judge can punish another judge. That is equality. Is that equitable? No, certainly not. That's not in conformity to the natural law. Number 4, in contracts, the law presumes the parties act upon a perfect equality. Not equity, equality. That means, in contracts, some people may have more power and authority and privilege than others. That's what equality means. In contracts, the law presumes the parties act upon a perfect equality. When, therefore, one party uses any fraud or deceit to destroy this equality, the party grieved may avoid the contract. In case of a grant to 2 or more persons jointly without designating what each takes, they are presumed to take in equal proportion. It is a maxim that when the equity, there's that word, that when the equity of the parties is equal, the law must prevail. Now that sounds good again, but it's not, because you've taken equity and you've turned it into equality. Okay, which means means the parties don't have to be equal or equitable. The law must prevail because you've gotten into a contract. You've agreed to be a lesser party. That's every time you sign a unilateral contract with government. Unilateral, what does it mean? It means you, singly, are signing over all of your rights and privileges to government. Government doesn't sign anything. Government doesn't sign a contract. Every contract you sign with a bank, government, any corporation, you're the one signing it. You're the sole signatory of almost every contract that you sign. Not ironically, that means you're the only one that can actually change the contract. But you agree to allow banks and other corporations to change the contract, including Microsoft, anytime they want to. So you agree to that, even though you're the sole power of that contract. You just don't understand what power you actually have and all the powers that you're giving away because you don't even read most of the contracts that you sign. We are in a pathetic state, to be perfectly frank. Between different creditors, equality is equity. Oh, folks, if you don't understand how bad of a statement that actually is, because remember, government is your creditor. You are the debtor. Equality is equity. What is equality? Being obedient to all law. What is equity? That which is in conformity to the natural law. What does government think? That equality is equity. That's Orwellian, folks. That's like war is peace. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. All right, so common law is in contradistinction to equity. Okay, well, since equity means the law of nature, I suppose that we really need to understand what the law of nature is. All right, well, let's go back to Bouvier's Law Dictionary. What is the law of nature? The law of nature is that which God, the sovereign of the universe, has prescribed to all men, not by any formal promulgation, but by the internal dictate of reason alone. It is discovered by a just consideration of the agreeableness or disagreeableness of human actions to the nature of man, and it comprehends all the duties which we owe either to the Supreme Being, to ourselves, or to our neighbors as reverence to God. Self-defense, temperance, honor to our parents, benevolence to all, a strict adherence to our engagements. An engagement is a contract. Gratitude, and the like. Now, which do you want to be under, folks? Do you want to be under common law, which is completely opposite? and repulsive to the law of nature? Or do you want to be under the law of God? Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be forced to follow the law of man? Or do you want to be responsible and self-governing to follow the law of nature? It's your choice. It really is your choice. We'll be back.
With no shoes on their feet. How's the people living in the street? Oh, there's a solution.
He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a problem with his poisons, but you know we'll find a cure. He's cleaning up the systems to keep his nature pure.
All right, folks, welcome back here in the Corporation Nation. Speaking of the corporation and its laws, well, what are we talking about here when we're talking, excuse me, about, when we're talking about the law of nature, you say, wait a minute, it still says you have duties. It says it is discovered by just consideration of the agreeableness or disagreeableness of human actions to the nature of man. And it comprehends, very importantly, it comprehends all the duties which we owe either to the Supreme Being, ourselves, to our neighbors, or as reverence to God, in self-defense, temperance, honor to our parents, benevolence to all, strict adherence, da-da-da-da. So wait a minute. But that's a duty. Well, no, you see, this is where we have to distinguish what the word duty means. Yes, of course, as with all legal and normal words, there's always the multiple definitions. Now, we've discussed this before. What is a right that you owe to the man, the law of man? What is a right? What is a law that is made by statute, by man? It's called a positive right. Therefore, you have a positive duty. In other words, as libertarians like to say, the basic belief is that in a libertarian movement is that, and I believe it's a correct understanding or comprehension, is that a positive right doesn't exist unless it's created by contract or compact. Okay? Whereas a negative right falls under the law of nature. Okay? Because you can't prove a negative. Right? If you don't have a contract, how do you prove a negative? If it's not written down, how do you prove it? You see, positive law is all law made by government. All the statute law, that is positive law. It's contractual. It's corporate. It's commercial. We're going to talk about UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, here in a minute as well, because that was another comment made last night that I really need to make people understand. It is not a remedy. It is not a solution. It is entering into commerce. And it is entering into the trap of the attorney class. And we'll explain that again. All right? So when we have the law of nature, and it says that you have a duty, what does that mean? It's very simple. You have a duty. Well, let's put it this way. A negative right is a right not to be subjected to an action of another person or group. What does that mean? That means it is your duty not to come to me and try to coerce or force me to do anything. That is your duty under the natural law. You break the natural law as soon as you try coercion of any sort whatsoever. Therefore, an attorney can only be positive in his function. A police officer can only be positive in his function. A government can only be positive in its function. Okay? It is an executive function to force people to follow the law. Okay, so what does positive mean? If negative means it's the right not to be subjected to something, well, positive law or a positive right, because of course right, the word right is completely misunderstood. A positive right is the right to be subjected to any action of another person or group. So a negative right forbids others from acting against the right holder. A positive right obligates the right holder, because it's a positive right. It's a government-granted privilege, and that includes freedom and liberty. It obligates the right holder to act with respect to the right, to the person giving them the right. Remember, you're required to follow the law. That is your positive nature. That is positive law. Contractual nature, that is the contractual nature of citizenship. If you're going to be under the law of nature and never be entangled into the positive law of man, you must at all times respect the nature of negative rights. Rights, again, you could say God-given rights, rights that cannot be written down because they are negative. They cannot be proven through contract or other. You must respect and understand the concept of the negative. Okay, a negative and a positive. When you put a negative and a positive magnet together, what happens? They don't like each other. They repulse each other. Positive law of man repulses negative law of God. It's that simple. If you are going to live under the natural law, you must do no harm to others or their property. It's really that simple, because in that one sentence, you have accomplished the duty to protect the natural rights of others by not harming them, by not coercing them or forcing them to do anything. It is so simple. It is so simple. When you add positive rights, statutes, all the other forms of law that are not or that are repulsive to the law of nature, which is all other forms of law, that's where the contract comes. That's where the proof comes in, the positive. That's where the duties, the positive duties, the required duties, and oftentimes, amazingly, it is a requirement, a duty for you to harm other people. That's the amazing part about man's law. Most of the time, you are required either to hurt other people, to harm them or their property, or you are required to allow yourself to be harmed, because you're required to follow all of the laws that are absolutely against all of your negative rights. As magnets, we lose. The positive, if we agree to it, if we consent to the positive, it will always push the negative out of the way. That's the maxims of law, unfortunately. And when you go to court, that maxim will always prevail because you've consented to the contract. You've consented to be under positive law. You've given away your repulsion of negative law. You have nothing to repulse the positive law with. It's really that simple. Good times. Let's go on. It actually lists the law. When you look up law of nature in Bouvier's Law Dictionary, it's very clear what it means. And it goes, of course, by Scripture, because that's the basis of all law. It says, the primitive laws of nature may be reduced to 6, namely, comparative sagacity or reason, self-love, the attraction of the sexes to each other, the tenderness of parents towards their children, the religious sentiment, and sociability. When man, as a group, is properly organized, he's able to discover moral good from moral evil. And the study of man proves that man is not only an intelligent, but a free being. And he is therefore responsible for his actions. Oh, man. That's one thing we are not. In positive law, we are not responsible for our actions. We have insurance. Our persons did it, not us. Our persons are the ones that are convicted. Our persons allow politicians to get away with murder. Our persons are the ones killing innocent men, women, and children of their countries. It's our persons that are signed up for military, quote-unquote, service. But under the natural law, we're responsible for every single action that we take. Every single one. The judgment we form of our good actions produces happiness. On the contrary, the judgment we form from our bad actions produces unhappiness. That's how simple it is. That's how simple the natural law is. Number 2, every animated being is impelled by nature to his own preservation, to defend his life and body from injuries, to shun what may be harmful or hurtful, and to provide all things requisite to his existence. Hence the duty to watch over his own preservation. Suicide and dueling are therefore contrary to this law, and a man cannot mutilate himself nor renounce his own liberty. That's exactly what you do when you become a citizen. You renounce your own individual liberty. We'll be back.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy. And then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like.
Interesting stuff. Now I'm going to finish up with Bouvier's definition of the law of nature. It goes on to say, number 3 is the attraction of the sexes. The attraction of the sexes has been provided for the preservation of the human race. And this law condemns celibacy. Now, this is a very straightforward sentence. Obviously, it's talking about the heterosexual relationship between a man and a woman. And, of course, that by the very nature of life and preservation of the human race, the law of nature obviously must condemn celibacy. Why do priests take a vow of celibacy? Because that would be completely against the law of nature, which God, the sovereign of the universe, has prescribed to all men. Why do priests take a vow of celibacy then? You might want to ask your local priest that. The attraction of the sexes has been provided for, in other words, by God, by nature, for the preservation of the human race, and condemns celibacy, this law does. The end of marriage proves that polygamy and polyandry are contrary to the law of nature. This one goes out to my fellow Utahns. And all of those other Mormons out there. The end of marriage proves that polygamy and polyandry are contrary to the law of nature. Hence it follows that the husband and wife have a mutual and exclusive right over each other. Now, I don't know if you remember when we had Tammy Pepperman on the first time, but she was very clear that she had given over all of her rights in the act of quote-unquote marriage, but not the state form of marriage. You see, there's a big difference. She understood that the feminist isn't going to like this. She understood that the husband and the wife must give each other everything, and the woman actually must be subservient to the man only in the law of nature. That doesn't take away a woman's rights. It doesn't do anything except protect the very nature of the attraction of the sexes. What we have today, the divorce and everything, we have a purposeful and very profitable industry of breaking apart the the breakup of the family, basically. And that's one of the highest forms of positive law that there is. This is why attorneys love the divorce courts. Very, very profitable. You actually convince the woman to go against her better judgment, rack up all kinds of attorney's fees, taxes, and everything else, and by the end, basically break the man and give most of the money away to attorneys. I mean, what a ridiculous concept that is. None of this concept of marriage should be anywhere close to being a positive law. You should not be married by the state, because that, as we've read before, the act of marriage, as far as the state goes, is a three-party contract between the husband, the wife, and the state. The state, therefore, takes the role of parens patriae and becomes basically what it considers to be the owner of your offspring, your children. The person that is created through the birth certificate and everything, the surname, as we've talked about. Okay, so what this is referring to is not a state-sanctioned or licensed marriage. This is, well, how would you say it? It's a natural marriage. The term marriage not being a legal term in this particular law of nature. The marriage under God, not under the state. Number 4, man from his birth is wholly unable to provide for the least of his necessities, but the love of his parents supplies for this weakness. Just talking about the family and the strength and what really is required for people to become what this is talking about. The power of the love of parents for their children and vice versa. This is one of the most powerful laws of nature. The principal duties it imposes on the parents are to bestow on the child all the care its weakness requires, to provide for its necessary food and clothing, to instruct it, very important, not under government schools, but to instruct it in the laws of nature, to provide for its wants. Wants actually means needs, by the way, and to use coercive means for its good when requisite. And by that, it doesn't mean the kind of coercion the government uses. It means that you must you must punish. You must use force. You must teach your children, sometimes through coercive means. That is not the same thing as the word coercive in law, which deals with positive rights, the right to have something forced upon you. When it comes to children, parents are basically government. I mean, that's they must be. Absolutely. And I think everybody understands the difference. I don't think I need to go further into that. Number 5, the religious sentiment, which leads us naturally towards the supreme being, whatever you want to call that, the creator, whatever. Okay? Don't get caught up in that. Is one of the attributes which belong to humanity alone, and its importance gives it the rank of the moral law of nature. From this sentiment arise all the sects and different forms of worship among men. Number 6, the need which man feels to live in society is one of the primitive laws of nature. In other words, we bind together like any pack of wolves, like any hive of bees, for protection and mutual support. The need which a man feels to live in a society is one of the primitive laws of nature. We thrive to be in herds, in tribes. Whence flow our duties and rights. In other words, in our situation where we are with other people trying to live in a quote-unquote community, not communitarianism, but community of people, a tribe, whatever you want to call it, that is where our natural duties come from. That is where the right to protect others' negative rights comes from. And the existence of society depends upon the condition that the rights of all shall be respected. On this law are based the assistance, succors, and good offices which men owe to each other, they being able to provide each and everything for himself. Now, I want to read you one more here, which is the definition of positive law. Now remember, the law of nature is not something that is necessarily written down. The fact that it is written down is strictly to make clear where all the other definitions say, hey, this is against the law of nature. It's antithesis. It's completely opposite. It goes against. So here is the definition of law positive or positive law. Positive law, as used in opposition to what we just read, natural law may be considered in threefold points of view. Okay, so right there, positive law is opposite to natural law. It is opposed to natural law. What is natural law? Or the law of nature? The law of nature is that which God, the sovereign of the universe, has prescribed to all men, not by any formal promulgation, but by the internal dictate of reason alone. I mean, how much more do you have to say about the law of the United States, the law of the Constitution, all the penal laws, all the other laws we mentioned? They are all opposite to natural law. Okay? Let's go over these 3 points of view. The universal voluntary law. Folks, guess what? You are voluntary citizens. All of the contracts, all of the compacts, all the agreements, that is universal voluntary law. Those rules which are presumed to be law. Universal voluntary law. My God, folks, that is the perfect description of our voluntary enslavement. We'll continue this after the break. Stay tuned.
Don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint. We're talking about law, a strange thing we call law, and we covered common law. And again, if it's your choice to be under common law, which represents the common law of England and the decisions of courts, well, you're already in it. No matter what they call it, it's just another form of common. I mean, what common, folks? What does common mean? If you're common, you're one of the lesser people. You're one of the quote-unquote imbeciles. You'd look up the word imbecile in the dictionary. It's a legal term. Okay? If you're under common law, it means you're common man. That's an insult, folks. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's the lowest form of denizen. An enfranchised slave, basically, is what the word means. Is where citizen comes from. It's positive law. Positive law is used in opposition to natural law and may be considered in a threefold point of view. Okay, so the universal voluntary law is one of those. Well, that's again what we're under. We are all voluntary citizens. We all voluntarily sign contracts. Of course, those contracts are generally forced upon us through coercion. But again, we don't have to submit to the coercion. We don't have to do all of it. That's why it's still voluntary. No matter how much coercion is used, it's still voluntary. Okay, voluntary is a funny word. Again, a legal word. The universal voluntary law are those rules which are presumed to be law. Yes, presumption of law. Positive law is the presumption of law. Prima facie, that's what that means. Rules which are presumed to be law by the uniform practice of nations in general. Uniform. Where have you heard that word before? Oh, that's right. Uniform Commercial Code and 118 other uniform laws, which we'll get into in a moment. By the uniform practice of nations in general and by the manifest utility of the rules themselves, the customary law. Okay, that's the second one of the threefold point of view, the customary law. That actually refers to common law, technically. The customary law, or that which, from motives of convenience, has by tacit but implied agreement. There it is again. Tacit but implied agreement. Tacit. Okay, that's not written consent. That's implied consent. Tacit implied agreement have prevailed, common law, not generally indeed among all nations, nor with so permanent a utility as to become a portion of the universal voluntary law, but enough to have acquired a prescriptive obligation among certain states so situated as to be mutually benefited by it. Yeah, again, we're talking about man's law. We're talking about a law of contract, of obligation, not of duty, but of obligation. Positive law, the opposition to natural law. Number 3 is the conventional law, or that which is agreed between particular states by express treaty, a law binding on the parties among whom such treaties are in force. Well, that's you're now in treaties with United Nations. You're in Social Security treaties with a bunch of other countries. You're under the treaty law. I mean, treaty takes precedent over all the other law. That's the problem with treaties. Oh boy, what is private law? Private law is an act of the legislature, which relates to some private matters which do not concern the public at large. Well, that's most of the law. So it's all private, most of it. Well, I'll tell you what. What is this thing? What is this thing when we talk about common law? By the way, common law, one more word on common law here. Remember Article 19 of the Liber Code? It says commanders, whenever admissible, inform the enemy of their intention to bombard a place so that the non-combatants, and especially the women and children, may be removed before the bombardment commences. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Oh, but wait a minute. It says then, but it is no infraction of the common law of war to omit, thus, to inform the enemy. Surprise may be a necessity. Oh, there's that word necessity. Okay, there it is. Common law. You see, the common law of war, that is the common law. Get that through your heads. Common law of war. We're under war statutes. I wish people could comprehend. What was it that the word gospel means? Gospel in its in its actual translation means good news of military victory. That's why you spread the gospel. That's why you spread the law merchant that's written in the Bible. The common law of war. Do you grasp what that means? I mean, in other words, your system of common law is given to you by the winner of war. And that's where common law comes from. Law, in and of itself, when it is a positive law, must be executive in nature. What does that mean? Well, your sheriff is the executive. He carries out all of the court's opinions. Without the sheriff as the executive or violent force behind the law, who cares what a judge says? The military is there to enforce the president's law. National Guard is there to enforce the governor's law. It's that simple. These are the executive magistrates. That is your common law, folks. Common law of war. Ay, ay, ay. Now, there's a couple of definitions here I want to make very clear before we move on. Bouvier's Law Dictionary describes exactly what the common people are. When you talk about common law, you're talking about the common law of military victory. The common people are called chattels. Chattels, what is chattels? According to Bouvier's Law Dictionary, property. A term which includes all kinds of property except the freehold or things which are parcel of it. It is a more extensive term than goods or effects. You see, debtors, taken in execution, captives, apprentices, are accounted chattels. Folks, you're debtors. Want proof? Let's go to Bouvier's under constitutor. Okay? One thing I like about Bouvier is it's very honest. What is a constitution? Very simply, it's a debt compact. Go look it up. So what is a constitutor? Under the civil law, he who promised by a simple pact to pay the debt of another, and this is always a principal obligation. A debtor. A constitutor is a debtor. A debtor is chattel, property of the victor, of the common law of war. We'll be back, folks.
Persistent ride. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Ride goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. It's up and down, round and round, and it's very loud.
All right, folks, welcome back.
Don't worry,
You're in the Corporation Nation. So what is the Uniform Commercial Code? Why is it that people love the Uniform Commercial Code? I fell for it. Don't get me wrong. UCC 1, UCC 3. Let's put all of our commodities into a corporation and, Universal Code. Yeah, I love it. No. What is Uniform Commercial Code, first of all, came around in 2001. Okay? That's how new it is. There are exactly, from my previous research, 118 uniform laws and acts. They're uniform acts, actually. The Uniform Commercial Code is one of those. It's actually one of the few that's not called an act. Uniform Adoption Act, Uniform Alcoholism and Intoxication Treatment Act, Uniform Arbitration Act. It goes on and on. Now, what's important about these things, like the Uniform Common Trust Fund Act, was enacted in 1938. Okay? Why is that important? These things, there was a couple that were in the 1920s, but for the most part, they all happened after the 1930s. 30s. So why is that important? Well, let's go back to 1933. March 9th, 1933. That was that wonderful day when Congress basically gave all of the power to the president and to the Secretary of Treasury. He said, okay, you do whatever the heck you want. You don't need our approval anymore. You are dictator. Okay? Here's what it said. An act enabling a declared national emergency in banking and for other purposes stated, being enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that the Congress hereby declares that a serious emergency exists and that it is imperatively necessarily speedily to put into effect remedies of uniform national application. This became the Act of March 9th, 1933. Okay, there's that word, uniform. Remedies of uniform national application. Where do these uniform acts come from? I've said this before, but I think it's important enough to say it again. These are private laws, or what are called uniform acts. And that includes the Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC, and all that goes with it. Uniform Commercial Code was actually first published in 1952. It's been amended and changed, and the recent change was 2001. Excuse me. Most of these happened after 1930. There were two that happened before 1933. All the other uniform acts happened after that date, okay? I'm just going to read this from my blog, actually. In the United States, uniform laws are created through what is called uniform acts, which are bills proposed as state law by a private association. These acts are drafted, of course, by the Bar Association, which is part of the executive branch of government, mostly through the United States Uniform Law Commission, or ULC, which is then approved by another private association, the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, the NCC-USL. You can verify this all for yourself. The NCC-USL is a body of bar association lawyers, private and governmental attorneys, state and federal judges, that just means attorneys in black muumuus, black robes, and university law professors, which are attorneys perverting young minds in our school system. So in other words, all attorneys. And they're typically appointed by the governor of each state. They draft laws with the goal of uniform enactment by each state. Okay, this is very much like Common Core, folks. Common Core is designed to bypass the federal lawmaking process and get each state to pass it individually. And then once all 50 states accept it, well, guess what? Then it's uniformly accepted, and the federal government can then just step in and make it federal law if they want to, because the states have already approved it. This is what the attorneys have done. They draft laws with the goal of uniform enactment in each state. District of Columbia, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, etc. But the NCC-USL does not, very important here, folks, it does not have any direct legislative power in and of itself. It's an appointed private association. That's where your laws, your Uniform Commercial Code came from. Do you trust something that came from a bunch of attorneys? Let me just ask that. Let me just put that question out there. Do you really think it's a remedy when it's within the very thing that you need remedy from? Do you really think that? Its drafted uniform acts become law only to the extent that they are enacted into law by the state legislators. Private association writes the laws, and your legislators then pass those laws. Okay? This is not the vote of the people. Okay? Quite the opposite. It's not for the people. It's for the people, but it's not by the people. Okay? It's very simple. This is called representative democracy, by the way. It's the mob rule of millions, governed or controlled by a few, well, bloodline cousins, as we've discussed, all of your representatives that you give up all your rights to. Your attorneys. Never forget that your representatives are attorneys. You've attorned your power, your individual rights to these men and women who claim to be your representatives. They write the laws. They don't ask for your vote. They don't ask for your consent. They just do it because they have your consent. It's implied when you cast your little votes. Even if you don't cast your votes, that's voting. That's voting, sir, because you haven't done anything to take yourself out of the process. All you've said is, I'm not going to vote. That's your right. Doesn't mean you're not voting. It just means you're silent. And silence is consent. So simple. This is the importance of taking away the power from the individuals, from the masses of people. Well, that's e pluribus unum, isn't it? And handing it over to these representatives. The people would never vote to enact such uniform laws of debt and enslavement upon themselves. They don't get the pleasure or privilege to vote because their representatives do it for them. Of course, they don't actually create the law. A quorum of attorneys does. Remember that? NCC-USL? United States Uniform Law Commission? A bunch of attorneys? Yeah, that's who's doing it. You really trust it? I mean, do you really think that this is a remedy? It's a valid, it's a valid question. One you might want to ask yourself. The people must be made impotent by the legal system and its quorum. In other words, hundreds of millions of voices must be squelched by representative democracy. Representatives must speak on behalf of millions, hundreds of millions of people. That's the only way you can have tyranny like we have. The bar lawmakers must be appointed so that their congressmen can approve those laws as the representatives of the people. So, folks, you don't make law. People do not make law because the people are the representatives. You're not the people. People is plural. You cannot be a people. It's that simple. People is a concept. It's not what you think. The bar and private corporations draft the law and Congress approves it without the vote of the people. All right? Over 118 uniform laws and acts have been created by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, in other words, attorneys, which have since been approved and adopted for the people, not by the people, under this executive national emergency status. It was necessary to create uniform laws. It's the only way you can control the people. This includes interstate commerce, child protective services, all of these things that we hate. Sorry, that's just the way it is. We'll be back.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Well, maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn, and so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? In the garden of your mind. You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind. In the garden of your mind. It's good to be curious about many things. You can think about things and make believe. All you have to do is think. You can think about things and make believe. All you have to do is think, and they'll grow.
All right, folks, welcome back. What is a republic? We were just talking about this in the chat room. By the way, the chat room is corporationnation.chatango.com if you want to join in. Always some good information going out there. I was fooled by the concept of republic. What is a republican government? For one thing, I was fooled by the Constitution because the Constitution very, very trickily, very, very shady thing is. It says the fourth section of the fourth article of the Constitution, it directs that the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government. And that makes it sound like the United States itself, in other words, Washington, D.C., is actually a republic. No. No, it's actually a federation, to be perfectly frank. You can look that up. But the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government. That's straight out of the Constitution, folks. That does not say that the United States is in itself a republican form of government. It says that each state will be guaranteed the republican form of government they already have. You see, we got to get rid of these fallacies that we have about the Constitution. These are just not true. And you can't read that. Of course, most people don't actually read the Constitution, which is problematic in itself. But you can't read that and possibly think that that says that the United States is a republic. No. All that is a protective clause. Nothing else. It says nothing about the United States itself. And again, we have to distinguish between the states and the corporation known as the United States, Washington, D.C., the district. Okay, that's what it's talking about. This form of government is to be guaranteed, which supposes that form already is established. In other words, it had to be there before the Constitution. So the Constitution didn't create republican government or a republic. Therefore, it has no power over it. It already existed, like so many other concepts, common law being one of them. Excuse me. What is a republic? Bouvier's Law Dictionary says republic is a commonwealth. That form of government in which the administration of affairs is open to all the citizens. In another sense, it signifies the state, independently of its form of government. In this sense, it is used by Ben Jonson, those that by their deeds make it known, whose dignity they do sustain, and life, state, glory they all gain. But really, it just means body politic, nation, or state. I mean, it doesn't mean, I even cringe when I look at my old documentary, The Corporation Nation. I explain what a republic is supposed to be. The truth is, a republic can't exist. It's a myth. It's not possible. If a republic means that all voices are counted, then there is no way a law could be passed, because no law is beneficial to all men, especially a positive one, especially one that a government that is that takes equity, twists it into equality. That's not a republic. You can't have equality in a republic form of government. It's impossible. It doesn't. Republic requires equity. When you say, "Oh, well, a republic is two wolves and a sheep discussing dinner plans," well, you know what? A republic is well-armed sheep, in other words. So the sheep actually have a chance. It's just not. It's not how things work. It's almost a paradox. You would not be able to have a republic government, because in a republic, a government could never pass a law. I mean, there would never be a law unless that law specifically said that under no circumstances shall the natural rights of men be subjected to any other form of law. And that would be the only law that might pass, but you'd need to get every single person to vote, because you would not be able to pass a law unless every single eligible voter voted. If you didn't have the vote of one person, you could not guarantee that 100% of the people want the law. It is, in fact, a complete fallacy to possibly have a republic form of government as we comprehend it. We love to talk about it. It's very romantic, but it doesn't exist in nature. It cannot. Well, I mean, to say it doesn't exist in nature is to say that the law of nature has been replaced by democracy. Go read what the Founding Fathers said about democracy. Okay, it cannot exist. If it does exist, then technically that means you're under natural law and there is no government. I mean, it's a fallacy. You can't have a republic government. You are the government. You are the well-armed sheep. So, I mean, the government and republic, two words that really have nothing to do with each other as we understand it. Now, the true definition of republic, a republican government, as Bouvier describes, a government in the republican form, a government of the people. It is usually put in opposition to a monarchical or aristocratic government. But again, what are the people? How can you have a government of the people? Again, this is fallacy, folks. If you have a government of the people, and the people actually means each individual man, then you'd have no government. So it's an oxymoron. It really, it's one of those dreams that will never be realized, because if it is realized, then there is no government. I don't know how else to put it, but hey, maybe you disagree with me, maybe you agree with me, maybe you just want to shoot the shite. 1-800-313-9443. We'll take a couple calls before we get out of here. If you like. If not, I'll just keep rambling. Oh, it's funny because, like, here in the chat room, again, another comment by Lark this time. He says authority. Authority is derived through election by the people of public officials, best fitted to represent them. Attitude towards property is respect for laws and individual rights, and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude towards law is the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence, with a strict regard to consequences. In other words, force. But authority is derived through election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them. Authority is derived. This would imply that that I would willingly give another man power over me. This would literally imply that I am giving God's authority over me. In the law of nature, I'm giving up my rights, my negative rights, and I am allowing another man to have power over me as my representative. Does that really sound logical? I mean, does that really sound like something you'd want to do? I guess to me that's a ridiculous concept. Just absolutely ridiculous. He says quotes are provided by the U.S. Army Training Manual on citizenship, U.S. history, and the Constitution. We'll be back, folks.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as a US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion. Despite protests and clashes in Athens streets, the IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the term economy entered our language from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. Well, how are we managing? Theories abound, but in practice, does anyone actually know what the hell's even happening? Well, it seems we've come to our global...
Welcome back.
Our financial day of reckoning.
Let's take some calls.
Have we invested too much?
Sorry, I actually left my callers on hold too long today. Rick in Florida. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I mean, it only took about an hour and 45 minutes for you to take my...
Oh, it only took a minute or a second and 40.45 for you to get disconnected. Sorry about that. All right. Looks like Chris in Las Vegas. Welcome to the show, Chris. Chris? Well, I guess that we won't have calls today. Too bad. I always like to hear from Chris. Rick sounded a little confrontational, but okay. We can handle that. Geez, where do we go from here? I've already I won't be disgusting. I've already spoken my word today. On Monday, I also am not going to have a guest, and I'm going to read my own personal Declaration of Independence, which is actually on my blog. My blog is Reality Blogger with 1G, realityblogger.wordpress.com. And I wrote this little thing called A New Declaration of Independence for Free Men. And it is myself writing my own Declaration of Independence, which, it's basically the same exact Declaration of Independence that was written so long ago, with just a few words added to it, to change it to an individual declaration. Really, that simple. And as George Washington himself wrote, the Declaration of Independence was nothing more and nothing less than an appeal to popular opinion of the day. It had no actual legal bearing or weight. It was simply a declaration. Probably why it was written so nicely and so well and referred to God and the natural rights of men and all of that, because it actually has no place. Some people say it's part of the organic law, but in fact, it's not law. It was simply a declaration. As the president himself stated, declaration of the popular opinion of the time, really had nothing to do. It wasn't original. This is according to George Washington or Jefferson, one or the other. It wasn't original. It took it was modeled after the Roman and Greek philosophers. It was nothing new. It was just basically a writing of the sentiment of the time. That's it. Just an appeal to the world's popular opinion. That's it. Nothing else. So I took it and I basically rewrote it. Although I didn't have to do much. I, for instance, crossed out the words colonies and replaced it with states. The present king of Great Britain, and replaced it with the presidents and Congress of the United States, which is basically the same thing. Oh, let's go back to the phones. Fred in Iowa, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Clint. I'm very impressed with your intellect, your philosophy, your power of rhetoric, your memory to bring argument to a discussion or your opponent.
I argue with myself very well, don't I?
Yeah, well, you do one hell of a fine job. But one thing that impressed me is when you told us about on the farm that you lived that you took this little lamb that was abandoned by the ewe mother, and I can picture you on your knees down in the straw and possibly the manure,
Absolutely.
taking care of that little lamb. And I was impressed by that. That got to me. And I am not skillful in debate and rhetoric, and I'm getting old, so my memory's going to hell. So I thank you, and you're doing a hell of a great job, better than I can do, to promote what I strongly believe. Thank you. Talk to you later.
All right, Fred. Really appreciate it. I truly do. Yeah, that lamb was one of the few actually to survive that was abandoned by the mother, and that's simply because we tried something different. We tried trying to bottle feed it right next to the mother and trapping the mother in a stall, and it seemed to work because the mothers are always calling out and the ewes are always calling out, and something about that attachment, I guess, helped. Let's take another call. Rose in Montana.
Hey,
Welcome to the
Clint.
show.
Thank you. Listen, one, I'm calling to give you encouragement. I love your show. And my husband and I listen every night. And your documentary on vaccinations was off the charts.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I became acquainted with you. But I have a question for you. You recently wrote a document on the Constitution, and I am trying very hard to remember the name and where to find it. And if you could enlighten me on that, I'd really appreciate it.
Was it the cracking the cult of the Constitution?
That's it.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a 3-part series, and I still haven't gotten to the 3rd part. But the parts 1 and 2, which are very lengthy, lots of information are up on my blog. If you just type "cracking the cult of the Constitution," it should come up.
It should come up. Okay, it's on your blog, not on your website. Okay, That's where it's having a little bit of a problem. But anyway, Clint, thanks for all the stuff. And I want to tell you, I also really appreciate Daniel coming on. I love Bert, and Daniel is a great added guest because that's an area like you. My husband and I are beginning to search Scripture, too, as well.
Oh, yeah.
And, and so there's a lot there as well. So, but anyway, just wanted to call and say thank you because of that one caller I got upset about. Well, I guess he called too early, right?
Yeah, wasn't that funny?
I guess you wait until you say you're accepting callers, and then you call.
I don't. My problem is I don't look at the screen very often because I'm so sucked up in my own. As Fred said, I'm sucked up in my own research and rhetoric that I forget to look and see if there's callers, and it's my fault. Sorry, Rick.
All right, Clint. Listen, you have a great night and a wonderful weekend, and we'll listen to the rest of the show and listen next week.
All right. Well, yeah. Keep looking at Scripture. I'm finding things every day in the Bible. And I take 10 minutes at least to look, and I find things all the time that are just blowing my mind that before would have never even occurred to me to even give it a second glance. So
I know. I thought raised in Catholicism, and so was my husband. And then we kind of fell away from that, and then we kind of started getting back into it a few years ago, and it was always kind of a little bit on the back burner. We'd have intensity, for a month, and then kind of backslide for a while. But we found that if you make it a part of your daily life, and I get up, 45 minutes early to an hour early every morning so that I can just read it. And if you read it slowly, really slowly, and ponder on things, and then I keep a great dictionary next to me, an old one, so that I can look up, because some of the things I'm not sure of, because we use a Schofield that has a lot of great explanation at the bottom of the pages, not on every page, but on most. And there are words that, so it's a great education even that way, learning what words mean and that sort of thing. But archaeology...
Look at Luke. I was just looking at Luke 22, and on some of the, BibleHub.com, it actually divides it into... It says the plot to kill Jesus, basically, and the number 3 says Because we're talking about the surname all the time. He says, then entered Satan into Judas, surnamed Iscariot, being of the number of 12. Very interesting, because it says here enters Satan under a surname, and communicated with the chief priests and captains. Just interesting. Again, I would have never thought of the word surname as anything but a surname. Now I know. In other words, he entered into the legal realm. Very interesting stuff. So thanks for the call, and we'll see you guys Monday. Take care.